So I haven't been following the impeachment trial too much, but just notes here and there. And it's shameful that it is shameful that the Republican Party leadership has become a de facto cult, a gang, and their leader is Trump. It's not the American people or the people they represent. Um, it's clear that they want to cover up anything that the president has done. They there's overwhelming evidence and testimony to convict Donald Trump of abuse of power and obstruction of justice, but they refuse the the Senate under the leadership of Mitch McConnell refuses to put out the evidence, the documents. Now, mind you, when you go to trial, have you ever heard of a judge or somebody being brought to trial and their evidence not being allowed to be in court, not because it was illegally acquired, because that's not the case. But imagine a judge telling a panel of jurors, 12 jurors on a murder case, for instance, you are not allowed to look at the evidence. We're not going to allow any evidence to be produced, and we're not going to allow any witnesses to uh, corroborate or dismiss the charges on the defendant. Imagine that. I mean, that's unheard of. So that's exactly what the Republican Party is doing. Their leadership. Here's one thing I don't, and it exposes the farce that the United States um, justice system is. If you and me get into a situation where we commit a fault and we get accused of a crime, of committing a crime, uh, the evidence is going to be presented. They're going to call witnesses, and my defense attorney or your defense attorney is going to present our witnesses, and our documents or evidence. Well, this is not the case here. This shows how classist um, the system is in the United States justice system. How classist there are classes of citizens, and there are people who are untouchable. They can get away literally with murder, with anything. And this is a case right here. There's, and they have an entire party covering up for them. Now they're not only that, they're standing in front of the entire world on camera saying that they were not allowed, that the Republicans were not allowed and to question testimony from the witnesses that the House of Representatives called, and that is absolutely false. There were over 100 Republican representatives during the questioning and during the procedures regarding the the people that the House of Representatives called to start the argument. Mind you, Adam Schiff did not want to. Neither did Pelosi. They didn't want to start a trial on an election year. They did not want to impeach unless it was serious enough. But what happens is Donald Trump just kept, basically this guy was taunting everybody. It's like, yeah, I did that. I did that phone call. And what about it? Come on, come get me. Just like that. I mean, there's so many people corroborating that he went and said, look, I got $400 million that, by the way, the House approved. The United States legislature approved $400 million for Ukraine to fight the Russians, because the Russians, remember, the Russians invaded and took over Crimea illegally, and have been fucking with the Ukrainians for a very long time. But since now, so he had two incentives to not release. Donald Trump did to not release the information, or I mean the aid, the $400 million in weapons, so they could fight the Russian aggression by Vladimir Putin. And one is to please Vladimir Putin. Why does it want to please Vladimir Putin? Well, it's simple. He's got a lot of business with Russian oligarchs. Russian oligarchs are for a lot of these people who are in charge of the economy in Russia. Are former KGB agents. When the Russian or the Soviet Union collapsed and communism collapsed, the people who had all the contacts and had all the power were the people that were connected with the KGB, and one of them, the most famous KGB agent, is Vladimir Putin. So those people started were the ones who were in control of the oil, the resources, all the businesses. And when Donald Trump started pissing away his father's real estate empire, he was broke. And the people who bailed him out were the Russians. He's connected to the hilt, to the Russian mafia. That's why he doesn't want to release all his taxes, because there's way too much shit in there. So what happens? You have somebody who has leverage, meaning they have power, they have information on a powerful person, i.e. the President of the United States, and the way to please, he's pleasing them so he gets favorable treatment in all his business dealings. So at any cost. So the cost is, number one, the Ukrainian people being ripped off after they were approved their $400 million. And he said, okay, well, we'll release this, but we won't do it unless you give us dirt on the Bidens, on Hunter Biden and Joe Biden. Now, a lot of people were doing business in Ukraine, and one of them being Hunter Biden, Joe Biden's son, and there was something with oil or something like that. I'm not sure exactly what the nature of the business was. So there was no investigation. There was no investigation going on by the Ukrainian government, but they wanted to press it and push and say, "Go find some dirt, and or else I will not release the help." So basically, he's trying to. He wasn't trying. He was pressing a foreign government to manufacture and fabricate accusations of corruption or whatever on the Bidens, so he could use it in the election. So what we have here is nasty what this guy did. So not only that, it also serves the purpose of pleasing Vladimir Putin, because if he doesn't release the help for Ukraine, that means the Ukrainians are not going to have weapons to fight Putin, and that's going to please Putin. So it's a double-edged sword, and it cuts both ways. It helps him stay in good standing with Vladimir Putin, who's got a lot of influence over his business dealings, and also helps him get dirt on Joe Biden, which, by the way, there was no investigation. Nothing was happening. He was just trying to force the issue and make it look like Joe Biden was under investigation and his son Hunter Biden, which was false, like most of the shit that Donald Trump says. So, in a nutshell, what the Republican Party has become is basically the Republican Party leadership I'm talking about. It's a cult. It's a gang. It's a Donald Trump cult. And, it's a sad day when you see the United States judicial, the United States legislative, the United States executive being shown for what they really are. It's a classist system. There are people who are above the law. They cannot be touched. And it's in full display for everybody to see. Now they need to fix that. It needs to be where neither the Senate nor the House can cover up for anybody. The same rules that apply to you and me. If you don't produce documents that are, subpoenaed by a court of law, we're going to go get you. We're going to arrest you and throw you in jail until you produce the documents. They should do that. The same thing. I don't care who it is, the president, Mitch McConnell, or anybody. Anybody who obstructs that process needs to be prosecuted to the full extent of the law. But obviously, the United States justice system is not built that way. It's built on a system of privilege, especially white privilege, and on a system of power and power privilege. And it's sad. They need to change that.